For the first frame that we're going to be building, I'm taking one that's inspired by Japanese architecture. We have a pair of long, overhanging rails covering a pair of narrow stiles. Some curves that'll be cut later into both the rails and the stiles give it a little extra flair. Now for this particular frame, I'm going to join the four pieces with short dowels. Now the plans called for making this frame and drilling the holes over at the drill press. But you don't need a big stationary machine to drill small holes like this. Instead, what I'm going to do is use a doweling jig and a hand drill to make all the holes. What I've done already is to lay out the pieces in their final position, and then I marked center lines where all of those holes are going to be drilled. So then it's just a matter of taking one of my stiles, lining up the layout line with the guide line on the jig, and then I can clamp it in place. And then I'll clamp this whole thing in my bench vise. And I'm ready to drill the holes. Drilling the holes in the top and bottom rails presents a little bit different of a challenge. There's really not much for that to be clamped into the vise. So what I'll do is I'll take the doweling jig, line up the two marks like I did before, and then clamp the jig to the rail. And then I'm going to set that assembly and just clamp the doweling jig now in the vise. Now I'm ready to drill the hole. But what I don't want to do is drill all the way through the rail where it would leave a hole on the bottom. So instead, I've added a piece of tape to act as a depth stop so that once the tape contacts the top of the doweling jig, I know that I can stop drilling. And with the joinery complete, now I'm ready to start shaping the four pieces. And I'm going to start with the long rails. To get the same curve on both pieces, I'm going to attach them together using two pieces of double-sided tape. I'm going to go light here on the double-sided tape, because if you were to put a big strip on here, it'd be pretty difficult to get these two parts separated. So just to keep them aligned, I'll reference them on the bench here, and then press them together. You can also see that I've drawn in the arch or the curved profile along the upper and lower edges of those rails. To do that, I marked the height of the arc and then bent a flexible steel rule and then had a friend come and just trace it for me. So with that in place, I'm ready to start shaping. Now I could step over to the bandsaw and do this, but I kind of like using hand tools. So I'm gonna clamp this in my vise. And then I'm going to shape it using a spoke shave. I can just take long passes. In a relatively short amount of time, I can work down to those layout lines. As I get closer to my lines, I'm going to reset the spoke shave for a finer cut to leave a smoother surface. Then I can finish up with just some scraping and some sanding. I'll shape the two stiles the exact same way, then we'll be ready to start some assembly. Before I start gluing the pieces together, once they're shaped, what I want to do is ease the edges on all the parts. Now I'm not looking for a routed roundover, something a little smaller, a little more friendly. So I'm just going to do it with sandpaper. What I'm looking for here is when I put the pieces together, that you can see that they're distinct, separate pieces. So I've even eased the edges where the joint faces are, just to create that separation. And I think it blends well with the overall shaping and profile of the parts. So now that I have all these pieces where I want them to be, I'm ready to start gluing this up. What I'll do is take some glue and I'm going to brush it on the ends of the dowels. I'm going to put those in the rail pieces first. And then on the exposed parts of the dowel, I can brush on just a little bit more glue to make them ready to accept the styles. Then a little bit of a squeeze with some clamps. Just enough to hold the pieces together. And once the glue sets up, we'll head over to the router table. To create a pocket on the back of the frame, I'm going to use a rabbiting bit here at the router table. It creates a nice, smooth rabbet that'll hold the glass and the photo. Using a rabbiting bit to create the pocket on the back of the frame is a good excuse to work on some hand skills, something I always enjoy doing. That's because the bit can't create a square corner, so I'll have to come back with a chisel and a mallet and then square those up. It takes a couple of seconds just for each corner, and before you know it, you're all done. The last thing that I did was to drill a couple of holes near the bottom edge of the lower rail. And those hold a couple of more dowels and work as a kickstand to hold the frame at a nice pleasing angle so you can just set it on a desktop or on a bookcase.
Woodsmithplans.com. Hundreds of professional, high-quality woodworking plans right at your fingertips. Every single plan is presented as an easy-to-download digital package that includes pages of step-by-step instructions, full-color photos, illustrations, and exploded views, retail sources for hardware and supplies, plus a cutting diagram and materials list. Many plans offer handy video overviews and guides. Plus, we're proud to offer our plans in both standard and metric. Everything is here, from gorgeous heirloom furniture projects to handy shop projects and upgrades. Clever, cost-effective storage solutions, as well as weekend projects and accessories that are great for gifts. All fully searchable and categorized for easy browsing. Woodsmithplans.com, everything you need for building fine woodworking projects.